The cold handshake, why boards and management do not connect on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is now one of the top risks any organization faces. Yet many boards feel poorly informed about it, and many executives feel they are reporting into a void. The information is exchanged, but it doesn't really connect. That is the cold handshake. It's a moment where board and management should meet on cyber risks, but do not. Welcome to the Better Boards podcast series, the podcast for chairs, CEOs, non-executive directors, company secretaries, and their advisors. I'm Dr. Sabine Dembkowski, founder and managing partner of Better Boards. We make the boards of the most ambitious organizations more effective. Our mission at Better Boards is to help create better boards. We do this by providing clients with an evidence-based approach to board evaluations and board development programs. Our clients have access to an innovative digital platform for their internal and external evaluations. The podcast is our contribution to the global governance community. Maya, I'm delighted to welcome you to the Better Boards podcast series. It's lovely to have someone from Switzerland.
Thank you so much, Sabine. I'm very happy to be here.
I met you at a conference and I was really impressed about what you had to say about cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. So let's jump straight in because, of course, it is a very hot topic on a hot recording day. In the heading to this podcast, we talk about a cold handshake between boards and management on cybersecurity. What do you mean by that? And why is it so common?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Sabine. Maybe I shortly describe what we mean by warm handshake. The warm handshake that happens in the boardroom when cyber is on the agenda of the board meeting and the CISO comes in, or the CIO, the person who talks about it from management, and presents the data that the board needs, the data that the board understands, receives, and can actively ask questions about. This is when trust also happens between the board and the executive team. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. There is a cold reality to that handshake. And last year, we interviewed 67 board members in 3 countries, and only 31% actually of the board members believe that they have the right information to assess the risks and take informed decisions. And preliminary data from this year's survey even paints a darker picture. The data collection is not yet finalized, but until today, as of the date of the recording, it's only 23% of the board members that actually feel comfortable with the data they have. That is a cold handshake.
It is. And what are they missing? Can they say what's missing for them?
Well, there's a number of reasons really why this happens. One reason is that often, and still to this day, boards and management speak a different language. It's business language, risk language against a technical language. We still sometimes have a lack of confidence in the board to push back on management or push topics that they do not fully understand. But the main reason, I would say, is structural. There is no standard, no agreed format, what a good cyber report looks like. There is no standard what directors actually should be looking at, how the data should be prepared, what assurance processes should be around them. And so there is kind of a whole infrastructure missing, and that makes this kind of uneasy and slightly queasy feeling in the directors' stomachs.
No, it's amazing that you can pinpoint it so clearly. And I mean, you are involved in many associations. I mean, you conduct studies yourself. Mm-hmm. So is there a way towards how this should look like, ideally?
Absolutely. Maybe I tell you a little bit more about the international study that we are doing. And if I'm talking about we, that is the team around the cybersecurity board reporting. That is Chris Verdonk and Tommy Viljoen and myself. We are the founders. We started this. And it starts with research. So last year we did, as I said, 67 board interviews. We also looked at 37 real board reports and analyzed them. And This year, we have expanded our research into several other countries in 5 continents, and we are also taking in the executive view. And really what we found is that 100% of the boards discuss cyber in some way, shape, or form. So it's not that they don't think it is important, far from it. That is understood. Mostly take the time to discuss it. But as I said, only 31% or 23% or in the low 20s and 30s, directors are content with what they see. And I mentioned earlier, partially it's the language that they speak. And here it's not only the way to communicate, but also how the report is built up. So, for example, we have asked the directors whether they discuss the business risks stemming from cyber events in their board meetings. Mm-hmm. And yes, 64% said, yeah, we do, which means that a large percentage actually does not look at it. However, when we looked at the real reports, we found out that only 22% of the real reports talked about the business risk. So, there is a different expectation there, and there's a different understanding there of, what should be in the report, but also what is in the report. And I think this is where we have to bring the two sides together and improve the handshake in its 2 dimensions.
I feel for the directors in terms of there are so many, you should do this, you must do this, you should know that there is AI, there is cybersecurity, there is ESG. I mean, it's a lot to comprehend. And I mean, I talked with some cybersecurity experts, and it's actually a whole world on its own with a language of its own. And you need to understand how advanced some hackers actually are. I mean, it's incredible what can be done. So how can directors really keep up with all of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So here, my clear opinion, and obviously, I'm happy to discuss that, is that all directors need a basic understanding of technology and of cybersecurity. It is expected of every director that they have an understanding of finances, and they have to be able to read a financial report. They have to be able to read an income statement. They have to be able to read a cash flow statement, things like that. And exactly in the same way, I think there needs to be a basic understanding of technology and cybersecurity. But also there has to be, someone on the board who knows a little bit more and can also drive the discussion a little bit further than the basics.
I mean, I have to say, when we look in our board evaluations at boards, I do not see many cybersecurity experts or people who understand cybersecurity in greater depth on the boards we evaluate. And that is across different industries. Does this match what you see?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a few good examples, but most boards don't. Sometimes you find, a technology expert, you find digitalization experts, and that's already good. Yeah. So don't get me wrong, but we very, very seldomly see cybersecurity experts. And so I think that is one of the good practices in terms of board composition that we found out in our research and now propose as a good practice to have the competency in the boardroom. But that's not all. If you're looking at governance, that is one side of the handshake, right? Is the governance. Basically, if you want a picture, you can think about the governance is the 2 hands, right? The board hand and the executive hand reaching out towards each other and want to meet. And then the reporting is where, you grip each other's hand and have a warm and firm handshake, right? And in terms of governance, there are other good practices that all boards actually can implement. Cyber has to be on the agenda, right? It needs to be discussed regularly at board level and should be clearly assigned to a committee as well to allow for deeper discussions. The responsibility has to be clear. Directors need to be aware of relevant laws and regulations, and in terms of strategy, they have to have a defined cyber risk appetite. There have to be several information sources, so it shouldn't be only one information source, but independent and external views are very helpful. They help the directors to form a picture, and multiple internal perspectives also give directors, a better picture of what's really going on in the organization. And all of that forms the board level governance side of the handshake, right? And then you also have the reporting, and that is where the meat is on the bone, right? And here it doesn't start with the content; it starts with the format and the structure, right? Do you get a dedicated cyber security or risk report, or is that kind of hidden inside an overall IT report or an overall risk management report? There are ways and criteria that define effective reporting, right? Is it this language understandable? Is the scope clearly defined, right? That is a big difference between financial reporting and cyber reporting. Often the scope is not, not really clear, and so on. So there are some basics that have to be met, and obviously then it's a question of the content. What exactly is it that is being reported to the director, so they can actually take that in and use it for taking decisions, for oversight.
So let's make this a little bit more concrete. So there are three elements. One element is the directors that need the knowledge. Let's come to that in a second. The reporting, and then also the CISO basically coming in, presenting to the board. Let's look into each of these three buckets. So if we go to the first bucket, now people are listening from all over the globe, and they say, if I'm honest with myself, I don't really have the knowledge. So how can they get the knowledge? How can the director now go about and basically gain this basic understanding of cybersecurity so that they're well equipped for a discussion in the boardroom?
Yeah, so there are several ways that you can gain knowledge that you don't have. And I probably don't have to tell anybody that, because most directors will know and will employ these mechanisms. One thing that organizations can do is they can do regular trainings with the directors, right? Basically, you train your own board. I think that is a good practice to do that regularly. If it happens on a yearly basis, would be great. Most organizations don't do that on a yearly basis, but it would be good. Having directors participate in simulations or crisis exercises is a very good thing, because it helps directors understand what is really happening if an event is unfolding. So that is the directors have to play an active role in most of the cases, but they do understand what is happening, and it also helps define the governance in times of an event, kind of really fleshing out if there is any decision that a board needs to take if an event is unfolding, right?
Okay.
What's the threshold at which the board is informed, right? Etc. So that is super helpful. And then obviously all directors, in my view, have a duty to educate themselves on the important topics. And here there is a number of ways you can do that. You can take courses, and there are multiple courses that are offered from universities, from board organizations. In some countries, you can get certifications, etc. You can, go to events that are held, where certain things are discussed, and, keep your eyes and ears open, be interested, read about it. It's the way you can learn, and then try to understand what the things that you have learned, what does it mean for your work at your company, at your organization, in your board.
So we have three concrete things, actually, what can be done on that side of the directors at the board level. Let's dive into what can be done about the reporting. You mentioned in general, but what are the specific things that should be in a report? Or maybe can you give a basic outline of a report?
Yeah, so I have to start with a caveat, and the caveat is each and every organization is different. And what we found out that each and every cyber report is different. So in the real cyber reports that we got in our research and that we analyzed, not one had the same topics as the other. Mm-hmm. However, having said that, there are some elements in there that should be in a good report. And I think it all starts with the risk and the risk appetite. And it all starts with, as well, that should fit to the business strategy. So the cyber strategy should fit to the business strategy. So start with that. Then every report should give a little bit of context. What I mean with this, the risk might vary inside your organization depending on the context. If you're in a high threat environment, your risk might be heightened, right? It might be the likelihood that something happens might be higher than at other times. So it's important to put your current posture and your current exposure and your current risk into the context of of what's happening in the world, of what's happening in your country, of what's happening in your industry, because that also gives you a better understanding of where you are at this point in time.
Okay.
And then I think it's important that that you have a small but good selection of key risk indicators that would allow you to understand where you are at this point in time. It's important that you understand the cyber governance in the organization. What is your organization look like? What is your budget look like? What kind of frameworks and standards are you following? What is the regulatory environment? Are you compliant, et cetera, et cetera? And then very often, and I think that is a good practice as well, you have to have a little bit of an outlook. An outlook in two ways. One way is kind of a content outlook. What is coming up? I think all boards had or are having probably a discussion about the mythos moment. What does the advancement of the abilities of the large language models to sniff out vulnerabilities, what does that mean for us as an organization? How do we prepare for that? I think that is something, or other new technology that is coming. What does that mean for us? That is one thing which I think belongs into the outlook, kind of the forward-looking risk view, but then also just very purely operational. What are our next steps? Where are we going in the next 3 months until the next reporting? What is the focus for now? And I think with that, you have a good and quite complete package that gives directors an understanding, and top that with an ask, a clear ask. So it's not only an update or something, but a clear ask to the directors. What is management asking of directors at this point in time?
Okay. And now let's look, I'm cautious of time. Let's look at the third bucket, basically the CISO coming in, having to report. If we have any CISOs listening to this, what should they bring into the boardroom? Maybe 3 to 5 things max that are really essential from your perspective.
So the CISO is not always the person who comes and reports to the board, right? And that is also a result of our research. And I believe every board should know their CISO, because that is the one person who is should be absolutely knowledgeable about the risks and what is going on in the organization. But I think the best thing that you can have as a board is a trustworthy relationship with the CISO. And that usually does not only happen or come along when somebody coming in for a report stays for 10 minutes and then goes and is never seen until the next time he or she comes in for 10 minutes, right? A trustworthy relationship very often requires a meeting or a catch up of, say, the chair of the audit committee or the chair of the technology committee, or even the chair of the board with a CISO directly, see where they are, see whether they have any concerns, and build that relationship. I think that is a really good practice that is, to this day, not always followed. and all the other topics that I mentioned from the board point of view. Actually, you could turn them around and ask the CISO to, not talk in abbreviations and not talk in totally technology terms, and make sure they also look at, what is important for the board to know. Maybe it is not important for the board to know the patching cadence, right? But maybe it is important to understand how a risk can be mitigated and where the organization stands and how many investments need to be done and where in order to mitigate the risks. So I think here the communication and the understanding where everybody stands and the translation, that is an important task of the modern CISO. Yeah.
So sadly, we have to come to an end. There's a lot to capture, but I'm glad that we put it in these 3 buckets. So for each of the groups, there are some clear tips and tricks how to basically create a warm handshake. Mm-hmm. So what are the 3 things our listeners should really take away from this podcast episode?
So I think this warm handshake that we have been talking about, and it is often so called, that has kind of the aspect of the board level governance that needs to be right. And it has the aspect of the reporting, right? And fix only one of those areas doesn't really help you. Yes, it gets better, but it doesn't really make a warm handshake. It basically makes a tepid or lukewarm handshake, right? And you want a warm one. And I think warming up this handshake, that in my view is a leadership task for the board. You cannot delegate that, the topic or the task to the technology function. And I think here the understanding is important that without cybersecurity, there is really no business. If that is understood, then boards will be on a good way to make this handshake warmer.
Fantastic, Maya. Thank you so much for making time and contributing to the Better Boards podcast series.
Thank you very much for having me, Sabine, and good luck with your further podcasts.
Once again, listening to the Better Boards podcast series. If you would like to have further information about our work, if you have ideas for future podcast episodes, please reach out. We are always happy to hear from you. And it's real people behind this. There are no AI bots doing this. So get in touch at info@better-boards.com.